In today's video, we're going to be discussing how to deal with your inner critic from a perspective known as internal family systems. So you might be looking at this graph and thinking, what's going on, right? And I've color-coded it and we'll kind of go into each step of the process. But the reason that I wanted to do this is because when people usually think about dealing with their inner critic or the part of themselves that judges themselves and criticizes themselves, they usually take a really oversimplistic approach. So if you look at a lot of videos on YouTube, the advice is generally be kinder to yourself, be softer with yourself, but no one's really getting to the heart of why that's so difficult to do. And what I love about IFS is that it really gives us a widened perspective on why it's so difficult and how to tackle some of those difficulties. So in the IFS model, we have the inner critic, which is usually the first place we go when we think about dealing with the part of ourselves that criticizes us. We have our inner defender and rebel. Here at the top, the inner mentor and the inner champion. And we also have our protected child and our criticized child. Now, what's really, really interesting in IFS is that it suggests that the reason that our inner critic becomes so vocal and the reason that we become so critical of ourselves is actually because there's a child. There's a hurt child within. There's a part of us that really needs to be protected, right? And it's usually the part of us that was criticized by other people. And so what happens is, in response to that hurt child, we've developed a part of ourselves that attacks ourselves first before anyone else can attack us. And in that sense, we are the protector of the inner child, right? The protector of the protected child, which is why the protected child is here and the inner critic is here. So what happens is, when this protected child faces some kind of hurt or heartbreak, our inner critic immediately kind of fires up and it's like, I'm going to protect this child that needs protecting, which is why it's called the protected child. And what it does is, in attempts to save the protected child, it actually criticizes another part of us, which IFS calls the criticized child. Okay? So notice there's two different children, the protected child and the criticized child. And so what happens when the inner critic criticizes the criticized child, that part of us then starts to hurt, right? And when that part of us starts to hurt, there's a part that protects that part, which is called the inner defender or rebel. Now, what happens when this part is activated is it goes to war with the inner critic. So you can see that's why I've drawn kind of this squiggly line from the inner defender rebel to the inner critic. Because the inner critic, in attempts to save the protected child, attacks the criticized child. And the criticized child, when it's attacked, asks the inner defender for help, and the inner defender goes and plays on the defensive with the inner critic. And now this is why when we're criticizing ourselves, there's so much going on. It's like we can't keep track of who's saying what. And one of the really, really cool things about IFS is that it tracks and monitors all these different dynamics. Now, what we ideally want to be able to do is we want to take this inner critic and we want to be able to transform it to an inner mentor. An inner mentor might deliver the same message as an inner critic, right? But the way that it does it is less harsh. If you think about a mentor is there to guide you, right? They're there to help you, to give you constructive criticism, to help say, maybe you could do this a bit better, maybe you could do that a bit better. The way that an inner mentor delivers the criticism is softer and gentler, and with an eye to protecting the child still, without activating all these other parts. And then what we also want to do is we want to try and change or transform the inner defender / rebel so that it becomes an inner champion, right? The part of us that defends ourselves, right? We want it to do so, but to be less defensive and more to be like, you know what? I'm going to be an encouraging figure. I'm going to be an encouraging force. So what we want to do is ideally transform our inner critic to an inner mentor and our inner defender to an inner champion. And then what happens is, when this transformation takes place, the inner mentor can love the part that was once defending, and the inner champion can love the part that was once criticizing. And in that love, they can help the protected child and the criticized child heal. So you'll see that's why I've labeled it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, what I'm going to be doing in this video series is I'm going to be breaking apart each and every one of these dimensions, and I'm going to give you a set of experiential guided reflections to go through so that you can kind of come to terms with these different parts of yourselves and hopefully transform your inner critic and your inner defender to an inner mentor and an inner champion, and to give your protected child and the criticized child the healing that they need. So if you want to do that, then stay tuned for this series. It's likely going to be a 6 or 7 part series. And if you want even more detailed information and you want it all in one place, then what I'm going to ask you to do is subscribe to my newsletter below, and that will give you the chance to have all this info in one place once I've completed the series.